Good morning, everyone. I know that this has been a very difficult week for our country. We are mourning the loss of at least 22 Canadians, mothers, fathers, brothers and sisters, daughters, sons, grandparents, and friends whose lives were taken in a horrific attack in Nova Scotia. We're also mourning the loss of Canadians from coast to coast who have died as a result of COVID-19. But despite the current challenges and the current restrictions, Canadians continue to come together to support and comfort each other through virtual vigils, online church services, tributes, songs, and heartfelt messages. Notre pays est fermé depuis près de 6 semaines. Pendant cette période, près de 40 000 personnes sont tombées malades. Des millions de Canadiens ont perdu leur emploi. Et les entreprises doivent fermer leurs portes sans plan de réouverture en vue. Canadians across the country have been following physical distancing guidelines and trying to keep up with the government's ever-changing recommendations. Now, the shutdown was supposed to buy the government time to build up capacity to keep Canadians healthy and safe. But here we are at the end of April, and the government still hasn't produced a single new ventilator. Federal shipments of masks and test kits have been defective or contaminated. Health Canada still has no plan to fast-track new drugs or testing. In fact, we recently learned that more than 50 companies are still waiting for approval to distribute test kits. Experts have said that Canada needs to triple its daily testing before loosening restrictions. So where's the plan to do that? What is the government doing to improve testing and tracing? Combien d'entreprises canadiennes peuvent s'organiser pour commencer à fabriquer des fournitures médicales essentielles? Où est le plan pour réapprovisionner les stocks nationaux? Just yesterday, we learned that the Liberals cut the number of stockpile storage locations for critical medical supplies by 1/3 in the past 2 years, and Canadians want to know why. Certain provinces have been able to flatten the curve and are now starting to talk about when they may be able to slowly start revising health restrictions over the coming weeks and months. This has raised concerns about a possible patchwork approach across the country. Other countries have released national frameworks, so why hasn't Canada? Does the federal government have a plan to start revising health restrictions in an orderly fashion when this crisis passes? Est-ce que le gouvernement fédéral a un plan pour commencer à revoir les restrictions sanitaires de manière ordonnée après cette crise? Est-ce que Santé Canada a des données de modélisation pour exécuter un tel plan? What are the eventual benchmarks that will guide lifting border and travel restrictions? Do we have enough personal protective equipment? How much PPE will be required to support key industries? How is the federal government preparing to get ahead of a possible second or third wave? Les Canadiens veulent de la clarté et du leadership pendant cette crise, pas de la confusion et des retards. Le Premier ministre a la responsabilité de présenter un plan aux Canadiens d'ici, de maintenant. Canadians are looking for clarity and leadership during this crisis, not more confusion and delays. It is incumbent upon the Prime Minister to present Canadians with a plan immediately. From the beginning of this crisis, this Liberal government has been slow to react, slow to close our borders, slow to put in place enhanced screening measures in our airports, slow to admit that masks could prevent the spread of the disease, slow to procure much-needed medical supplies, slow to increase the wage subsidy, devastatingly slow to offer help to our energy sector. Ça ne peut pas continuer. La vie et le gagne-pain des Canadiens dépendent de la réponse appropriée du gouvernement à cette pandémie. Now, I want to be clear. Canadians recognize that we must continue to help Canadians through the health impacts of this crisis. We have put forward a number of constructive solutions to do so, including calling on the government to fast-track Health Canada approvals for new drugs and tests, making sure that frontline healthcare workers have the personal protective equipment that they need. We've also proposed ways to help businesses and workers, like allowing banks and credit unions to deliver loans until companies' wage subsidies arrive. Rebating the GST small businesses have collected in the last 12 months, increasing the charitable donation tax credit. Nous avons proposé aujourd'hui un nouveau programme pour aider les étudiants et les jeunes à trouver des emplois dans le secteur agricole, ce qui comprend l'industrie des poissons et fruits de mer, afin de répondre aux pénuries de main-d'œuvre sur les chaînes d'approvisionnement alimentaire du Canada. Today, we proposed a new program to match students and youth employees with jobs in the agriculture and agri-food sector, including fish and seafood, to address labor shortages in Canada's food supply chains. We've also called for more support for seniors and raised concerns with reports that expectant mothers who applied for EI before March 15th are not receiving the Canada Emergency Response Benefit they are entitled to. Il ne suffit pas de continuer à annoncer de nouvelles prestations. Le gouvernement Trudeau doit vraiment envoyer des résultats aux Canadiens et aux Canadiennes. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. Happy to take your questions.
We'll now go to the question period. We'll start with 3 questions on the phone. It's always 1 question, 1 follow-up as per usual. Operator, do we have a question?
Thank you. Please press star 1 at this time if you have a question. Veuillez appuyer sur l'étoile maintenant pour poser une question. Our first question is from Tom Korski, Black Lux reporter. Please go ahead.
Mr. Scheer, I wanted to ask you about accountability. The health department censored, we understand, 1,000 pages of records that were compelled for release by the Commons Health Committee. Access to information is suspended. The Library of Parliament is now refusing to release sessional papers. These include inquiries of ministry sought by some of your own caucus members. For instance, on details of pandemic contracts. I wanted to ask you, you do have the Public Accounts Committee, very powerful committee that is known for naming names. Have you or will you attempt to get the Public Accounts Committee into session to start compelling release of some of these documents?
Well, we're always very concerned when this government is slow to provide information or redacts or keeps facts and figures hidden. It's a pattern that we've seen with this government since its beginning. They've been highly criticized for their responses and their delays in responding to access to information requests and in answering questions to parliamentarians. One of the things that we were trying to do over the past few weeks in negotiating with the other parties as to how Parliament would continue to conduct its affairs was to empower the committees that are sitting to be able to compel documents and compel testimony. Unfortunately, the government did not agree with that, did not want to empower the committees with those powers. So we will continue to explore parliamentary tools at our disposal. And it was another reason why we were pushing for regular accountability sessions in the chamber, in the House of Commons, so that we can get to the bottom of these types of things.
In the absence of that, the lobbyist registry is running red hot. Lobbyists are having a lot of meetings. There's no stay-at-home order that seems to apply there. There's a lot of money, unprecedented billions, going out the door. So are we left then to put all these pieces together about how the government ran the pandemic 18 months from now, or where do we stand?
Well, we're continuing to ask the tough questions about the day-to-day operations of the government and their slowness and inability to get many of these benefits out the door and to ramp up things like testing and to fast-track approvals. We have several times called for a permanent auditor general to be named to ensure that there is a very rigorous process of transparency and accountability. I believe that when we're through the health phase of this crisis, there are going to be an awful lot of questions as to why the government did or failed to do many things, including like dumping significant percentages of our stockpile, closing down warehousing sites, and of course ensuring that accountability happens is key, and that's another thing that we will be pushing for when Parliament does resume is a very comprehensive look at what happened.
Operator, do we have another question?
Thank you. Our next question is from Christian Noël de Radio-Canada. À vous la parole. Please go ahead.
Bonjour, Monsieur Scheer. J'aimerais savoir, vous demandez au gouvernement d'avoir un plan pour relancer un pan de l'économie. Moi, j'aimerais savoir quel serait votre plan, quel secteur de l'économie reprendrait en premier, quel pourcentage de l'économie ça représenterait et quelles mesures sanitaires vous metteriez en place pour être sûr que les Canadiens sont protégés si vous étiez premier ministre.
Alors, notre concentration aujourd'hui, c'est un plan pour réviser les restrictions de la santé. Nous, comme une population, nous avons tout respecté les directions des agences de la santé. Nous avons effectivement, tout chez nous, un grand pourcentage des Canadiens sont toujours chez eux. Lorsqu'on peut donner le gouvernement le temps qu'il a besoin pour augmenter le nombre des épreuves, des tests, pour procurer des respirateurs additionnels, pour assurer que notre système de la santé a la capacité pour gérer beaucoup des Canadiens avec le COVID-19. Alors, ça s'est tout commencé au mois de janvier, février. Les mesures très strictes ont commencé au mois de mars. Nous sommes ici le fin d'avril. Où est le plan pour assurer qu'on atteigne les niveaux nécessaires lorsqu'on peut réviser les restrictions de la santé? Alors, nous, comme une partie, nous avons demandé au gouvernement d'assurer que nous avons une supply chain pour les pièces d'équipement médical. On doit avoir un plan national pour assurer que toutes les provinces ont l'équipement nécessaire. Alors, ça, c'est les choses qu'on veut voir. Où est le plan pour le gouvernement lorsqu'on peut dire, OK, maintenant, on peut nous sommes préparés pour une deuxième vague, mais nos systèmes de la santé à l'équipement nécessaire. C'est les choses comme ça qu'on doit avoir dans un plan lorsqu'on peut parler de réouvrir les autres aspects de l'économie.
Donc, si je comprends bien, vous, de votre côté, vous n'avez pas de plan précis pour faire cela. Ouvrir l'économie, ça veut dire aussi plus de cas d'infection dans la population, plus de malades graves, des morts aussi. Est-ce que vous êtes prêt à faire cet échange, c'est-à-dire rouvrir l'économie, mais plus de monde à l'hôpital?
Je crois que vous êtes concentré sur un autre enjeu. Avant qu'on peut parler d'un plan de réouvrir l'économie, on doit être sûr que ce gouvernement a un plan pour assurer que nos systèmes de la santé ont la capacité nécessaire, des choses comme ça. Les experts de la santé ont dit qu'à peu près 70% des Canadiens vont avoir le COVID-19. Et les mesures qu'on a maintenant, c'est pour donner au gouvernement le temps qu'ils ont besoin pour réagir, pour construire les capacités additionnelles. Alors, nous sommes ici 6 semaines après que les mesures très, très strictes ont été imposées et on dit maintenant, OK, c'est quoi le plan? Est-ce que les systèmes de la santé ont l'équipement nécessaire pour assurer qu'ils peuvent gérer beaucoup des cas? Alors, ça, c'est notre appel aujourd'hui. C'est quoi les niveaux? C'est quoi les benchmarks? C'est quoi le plan pour procurer les respirateurs? Pourquoi il a pris 6 semaines avant qu'on ait une seule respirateur additionnel? Alors, ça, c'est la concentration aujourd'hui. Après qu'on est sûr qu'il y a un plan pour la santé, pour la crise, les impacts de la santé, on peut parler de l'économie, mais pour le moment, nous sommes concentrés sur le plan pour les révisions des restrictions de la santé après que le gouvernement est préparé.
We'll now take one last question on the phone. Operator, next question.
Merci, thank you. Notre prochaine question est de Lina Dib de la Presse canadienne. À vous la parole.
Oui, bonjour, Monsieur Scheer. I'm going to try this in English because I'm sorry, maybe I'm just too tired. I can't follow your French. Health issues are of a provincial jurisdiction. So this plan that you're talking about how what measures to be put. They cannot be the same all over because the epidemic is not the same all over. So I don't quite understand what kind of plan you're asking about lifting these the sanitary measures.
Well, we're talking about ensuring that the government has used the time that Canadians have given it to be able to provide the provinces with the supports that they need, being able to be sure that there is the necessary personal protective equipment in a way that can flow to the provinces that need it the most, depending on the timelines and depending on where each province is at with the number of active cases. We were told that the government needed to buy time, that we needed to stay at home and follow these guidelines in order for the government to build up the necessary capacity on the healthcare side. This government on the federal level is talking about a national procurement plan to get things like ventilators. Well, we're told now, on Monday, we were told it won't be till May, early May, that we'll get the first ventilators from that national procurement plan. So how many are coming? How many will be delivered to provinces? How much personal protective equipment can be guaranteed? These are the things that the government needs to explain to Canadians that it's been doing with the weeks that we've been trying to give the government time for.
But weren't you also talking about a plan to lifting the measures, the sanitary measures, la distanciation? Weren't you talking about that as well?
We're talking about ensuring that the government can get us to a place with clear benchmarks and detailed modeling to explain when we can get to the point where health restrictions can be revised in relation to where we're at with the spread of the pandemic. That's the key here. That it's clear that we cannot continue without some plan or without an explanation as to where we're at with building up our healthcare capacities, where the federal government is at, and ensuring provinces have the capacity that they need, have the equipment that they need as well.
We'll now take questions from.
Good morning, Mr. Scheer. David Thurden from CBC News. Considering the killing spree in Nova Scotia that we saw, are you willing to fast-track the government's bill to ban assault-style weapons?
Well, first of all, I continue to be horrified by the details that are emerging from the case. I had the opportunity to talk with the principal of the school where one of the victims taught, and I can understand that it's hard to imagine the grief and the shock and the horror that is going through not only the community of Nova Scotia, but I believe all Canadians as details of the case emerge. As details of the case emerge, it's important to respond to those facts. We know that right now a lot of questions are being asked as to what happened internally with the RCMP. Why did it take so long? Why no alert message was ultimately sent out? What were the internal communications problem that led to that? I will point out that early reports indicate that this individual did not have a license, and therefore all his firearms were illegal. So we're going to continue to do everything we can to support those communities affected by the shooting. And Conservatives have always supported common sense firearms legislation that keeps firearms out of the hands of dangerous individuals, that cracks down on illegally trafficked, illegally sourced firearms.
So, given the little that we do know, would you work with the Liberals to strengthen Canada's gun laws to prevent further carnage?
We had a plank in our platform called A Safer Canada that did precisely that: strengthen Canada's gun laws, focusing on illegally trafficked, illegally sold firearms, stronger background checks, stronger licensing provisions. Those are the types of things that Conservatives have always supported. I will point, as I said, this individual did not have a license. Therefore, all his firearms were illegal, and we need to ensure that there are stronger enforcement provisions in our firearms laws. We need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep firearms out of the hands of dangerous individuals, and that has always been the focus of a conservative approach to firearms legislation.
Next question.
Mr. Scheer, Kevin Gallagher with CTV News. I'd like to get your take on one of the opinions of your caucus members, Derek Sloan. He's asking for Dr. Theresa Tam to be fired. He's questioning whether she speaks for Canada or the Chinese Communist Party. Do you agree with Mr. Sloan?
So as a rule, I don't comment on leadership candidates or on policy announcements or positions that leadership candidates have taken. I'll leave it to each leadership candidate to speak for themselves and explain their views, and ultimately it will be up to members to select the next leader of the party. I've said that this government needs to be held accountable for the decisions that were made. I don't believe that we should allow this government to have a scapegoat to pin the blame on anybody else. These were ministers who chose to ignore some advice and chose to listen to other advice. They chose to ignore the warnings of the Canadian military intelligence reports that indicated that COVID-19 was a serious threat and should be taken seriously. This government chose to ignore that advice, listen to other advice to keep our borders open and to continue flights in and out of China. Those are things that this government has to be held accountable for, and that's what our party will do.
Mr. Sloan is still a member of your caucus, and he's peddling conspiracy theories. That's the criticism here. So why won't you comment on that? Do you as well think that Dr. Theresa Tam should be fired? And do you think that she was peddling misinformation from the Chinese Communist Party during the beginning of this pandemic?
As I just said, I believe that this government needs to be held accountable for decisions that they made based on the advice that they chose to listen to. So our focus is holding ministers and the Prime Minister accountable for why they listened to some recommendations and ignored others, especially when it comes to why were they so reliant on information that was coming out of the WHO instead of listening to domestic Canadian voices who were advising this government to take this threat much more seriously much earlier on. That is a choice that this government made, and we will hold the government accountable. We will hold ministers and the Prime Minister accountable for their decisions.
Rico Walsh with the Globe and Mail. Mr. Scheer, Derek Sloan's comments are being called racist. He's suggesting that Dr. Tam is somehow an agent of China because of her race, it appears. You are still the leader of the party. You have chosen to maintain your role as leader until a new leader is elected. Is he welcome in your caucus?
As I said, I do not comment. I have not, nor will I in the future, comment on individual positions or statements by leadership candidates. I have just explained what our caucus position is. Our caucus position is that the government needs to be held accountable for its decisions. That is what we will continue to do.
He was welcomed into the Conservative Party under your mandate. He won his nomination under your mandate as leader. Do you stand by welcoming him into the party?
As I said, I won't be commenting on individual statements or positions that leadership candidates take. That's up for them to explain. And ultimately, the members of our party will decide when they vote in the leadership race. Our caucus position, what I am focused on doing, is holding this government to account for their decisions. They were the ones. This government said that we should not impose travel restrictions on travel to China. We should not bring in enhanced measures at our airports. That we should not close the border. That was this government's decision based on advice that they decided to listen to and ignore the advice from other experts. So those individuals have to be held accountable for. As I just said, I just answered that question. I don't comment on individual statements that leadership candidates make. That's up for the membership to decide. We're going to stay focused on keeping this government held accountable. Sorry, you had multiple questions now.
Will caucus hold a review of his status in caucus? Is he still welcome in your caucus?
Any other questions?
This concludes our press conference. Ici met fin la conférence de presse.
Thanks
Merci.
very much.